He laughed, signing the divorce papers, until the judge read the will. The room was so silent that even the rustle of paper sounded sharp. Cole sat with perfect, almost arrogant posture, his muscular frame filling the chair as if he were the one running the hearing. He wore a tailored suit, a smug half-smile, and the confidence of a man who believed the outcome was already guaranteed. Across from him sat Emily, quiet, composed, trying to steady her breath. Not because she feared losing anything, but because Cole kept looking at her like she had already lost. Like she was predictable. Like he had outsmarted her long before they stepped into that courtroom. Before we go any further, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It truly helps us grow. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. His mother sat behind him, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes filled with an unsettling satisfaction, almost as if she knew exactly how this day was supposed to end. But she didn't. None of them did. Because the sealed envelope the judge was about to open would unravel everything Cole thought he controlled. Yet to understand how they reached this moment, the story had to go back 3 years, back to a time when Emily was a completely different woman, and Cole was playing a role she never realized was scripted. Emily was 26 then, a full-time nurse working long, exhausting shifts. Her life was simple, honest, and far from glamorous. She rented a modest apartment, drove an old car, and carried the weight of losing her father a year earlier. He had been a quiet man, hardworking, the kind who valued loyalty more than luxury. Emily hadn't inherited money or property, at least, that's what she believed. Then Cole entered her life. They met during one of her overnight shifts when his cousin was admitted after a gym accident. Cole stood in the hallway like he owned the place, tall, athletic, broad-shouldered, and calm in a way that instantly commanded attention. He thanked her, joked with the nurses, charmed an entire room without even trying. 2 days later, he was waiting for her outside the hospital with coffee and a smile. He said it was a proper thank you. Emily, exhausted and unaccustomed to being pursued by someone so polished, accepted. Their first date felt unreal: rooftops, skyline views, restaurants she couldn't afford even on special occasions. Cole made her feel seen, admired, chosen. After the loneliness of losing her father, that feeling was intoxicating. Within months, they became inseparable. Cole brought lunch to the hospital, left notes in her locker, memorized her schedule. He insisted on driving her home after late shifts for safety. He encouraged her to take fewer hours because he wanted her rested. It all seemed thoughtful at first. But slowly, without realizing it, Emily began giving up pieces of her independence. Then there was Cole's mother. She greeted Emily with polite smiles, but cold eyes. She complimented Emily's kindness, but never her ambition. She made subtle comments about nurses being steady women, the kind who supported strong men without demanding too much. She spoke like someone evaluating a potential investment, carefully, cautiously, always calculating. Emily brushed it off, thinking she simply came from a traditional family. When Cole proposed, it was dramatic: sunset, private beach, a ring that sparkled unnaturally bright. Emily cried. His mother cried. Everyone said she was lucky. For a while, married life looked perfect. But certain things changed. Cole insisted on handling all paperwork: mortgage renewals, insurance forms, joint accounts. He said he was better with numbers. He asked her to sign documents quickly before work, assuring her they were routine. She trusted him completely. He monitored her work hours more. He questioned her male coworkers. He disliked when she picked up extra shifts. He dismissed her dreams of advancing in the medical field, saying promotions were too stressful. At home, she felt smaller. But she didn't think he was malicious, just protective. Everything shifted the night Emily overheard a conversation not meant for her. Cole was in the kitchen with his mother. Their voices were low, sharp, serious. Emily approached, expecting something about family or business. Instead, she heard her own name, spoken in a tone she had never heard from either of them. Cold. Strategic. Purposeful. Fragments of sentences drifted through the hallway. She trusts you completely. You need to get her to sign the remaining documents. Stop delaying this. Time is running out. Emily froze. The words tangled in her mind. None of it made sense, not yet. But the unease settled deep in her chest. When Cole noticed her entering the room, he turned instantly warm, affectionate, pretending everything was normal. He kissed her cheek, asked about her shift, smiled like he always did. But Emily wasn't convinced anymore. From that night on, she noticed more. The phone calls he took outside. The folders he quickly closed when she walked by. The way his mother watched her, not with affection, but analysis. The papers he always rushed her to sign. The nervous laughter Cole gave whenever money came up. She didn't know the truth. But she sensed the lie. And by the time Cole laughed while signing the divorce papers, Emily had already learned one lesson. People reveal their true intentions only when they think they've already won. And Cole believed he had won. At least until the judge read the will. For the first few months, Emily believed she had stepped into one of those relationships people envy. Cole was attentive in all the ways that made a woman feel seen. He remembered the smallest details, like how she liked her coffee light, with the tiniest splash of vanilla, and how she always tucked her hair behind her ear when she was trying not to cry at sad movies. He brought flowers when she'd had a long shift at the hospital. He rubbed her shoulders when she studied for exams. He told her she deserved the world, and for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Even Cole's mother seemed to adore her. At least at first. Their conversations were polite, warm even, but something about the older woman always felt slightly too measured. Like she spoke through a filter. Like she was evaluating Emily, not welcoming her. But Emily ignored it. People could be complicated, she told herself. And families needed time. After the engagement, life settled into something that looked almost perfect from the outside. The kind of perfection that photographs well. Yet, beneath that surface, the first cracks began to appear. They were tiny, almost harmless, things anyone could dismiss. Cole would make comments about her job after long shifts. He never insulted nursing directly, but he had a way of minimizing it without ever raising his voice. He would mention how much more she could do if she didn't waste so much energy on hospital nights. Or how tiring it must be to manage people's messes all day. There was no cruelty in his tone, only a smooth, dismissive kindness that made it hard to call out. Sometimes, at dinner with friends, he introduced her with a little joke she never found particularly funny. He'd say Emily was the heart of the relationship, while he was the one with the logic. People laughed. So Emily did too. But in quiet moments afterward, she wondered why it made her feel so small. Cole wasn't cruel. He wasn't distant. He wasn't cheating. He wasn't doing anything wrong, not technically. And maybe that was the confusing part. He'd hug her from behind while cooking dinner, kiss her forehead before bed, buy her chocolates when she'd had a bad day. But every now and then, his affection came with an undertone, something possessive, something controlling disguised as concern. Like the night she mentioned applying for a supervisor position at the hospital. He didn't discourage her outright. He simply smiled, kissed her temple, and said she didn't need all that stress when he was already building a future secure enough for both of them. Emily laughed it off at the time. People in love said silly things. She didn't realize it was the beginning of a pattern. Cole's mother, meanwhile, started visiting more often. At first, Emily thought it was sweet. But soon, those visits became inspections, gentle, polite, coded inspections. The older woman's eyes scanned Emily's apartment as if it were a puzzle she was trying to solve. Whenever Emily talked about her father, about the land he had left behind, about the quiet life he lived, the older woman's expression didn't soften. If anything, it sharpened. She would ask questions that sounded harmless, but felt oddly specific. Questions about paperwork. Questions about deeds. Questions about savings Emily didn't even have. Emily found it strange, but she chalked it up to wealthy families being particular about everything. Months passed. More cracks formed. Cole became slightly more dismissive. His mother slightly more present. Emily slightly more anxious. But the couple still looked perfect. Still acted perfect. Still seemed perfect. They went on weekend trips, had date nights, made plans for children one day. Cole would place a hand over her stomach, smiling at the future he claimed he wanted. And Emily believed him. She believed him even when something in her stomach twisted. Even when his laughter felt a little too sharp. Even when his mother watched her a little too closely. Love makes people blind, but comfort makes them quiet. And Emily was both. She didn't know yet that her life was slowly being rearranged behind her back. She didn't know someone was watching her choices, her habits, her vulnerabilities with growing interest. She didn't know anything yet, but she would. Soon enough. Emily always believed relationships changed when two people started building a life under the same roof. She just never expected the change to be so quiet and so hard to describe. After she and Cole moved into their shared apartment, something intangible shifted in him. Not dramatically, not violently, nothing she could point to and say, there. That moment right there. But a subtle change, like a draft sneaking through a closed window. He still kissed her good morning. He still wrapped his arms around her waist while she cooked. He still told her he loved her in that low, warm voice that once melted her knees. But the tone behind those gestures had begun to change. When she came home tired from a 12-hour shift, Cole would smile, take her coat, and suggest she rest instead of applying for that hospital course she had been excited about. He framed it as protection, as care, as love. When she mentioned saving a little more aggressively for the wedding, he told her she shouldn't worry about finances at all. He repeated it often enough that it seeped into her routine. Soon, she stopped checking certain accounts, thinking it was normal to let him handle everything. It wasn't obvious control. It looked like support. It sounded like comfort. But Emily's world was being rearranged piece by piece, and she didn't even feel the hands moving things around her. The apartment itself began reflecting this shift, slowly becoming more his than theirs. His workout equipment occupied the corner where she once kept a reading chair. His mother brought boxes of things from his childhood home to decorate the space. And Emily found herself quietly making room, as if stepping aside was easier than questioning anything. Cole's mother visited frequently, too frequently for something that wasn't a problem yet, but sat heavily in the air. During one of those evenings, while Emily cooked dinner, she overheard the older woman speaking softly in the living room. Not cruelly, not urgently, but deliberately. The words weren't clear, just whispers, too soft to decipher. When Emily stepped closer, a floorboard squeaked beneath her foot, and the conversation ended abruptly. By the time she entered the room, both faces carried carefully constructed smiles. Emily brushed it off, telling herself she was overthinking things. People whispered all the time. People had secrets. And families, especially wealthy ones, had entire histories written between the lines. But the uneasy feeling stayed with her. Cole's mother had developed a habit of asking Emily questions that felt harmless only on the surface. Things about her father, her upbringing, what he left her, how she handled paperwork, whether she ever felt overwhelmed by legal or financial matters. Emily answered politely every time, telling herself it was normal curiosity. But the questions had a pattern, subtle, probing, circling the same subjects like a hawk tracing slow circles in the sky. Still, Emily pushed the doubts away. Love meant trusting. Love meant giving grace. Love meant letting things settle instead of searching for cracks. And besides, Cole always knew how to soothe her fears. Whenever she grew too quiet, he held her, whispered reassurances, kissed her forehead until her breathing slowed. He always knew exactly when to be soft. But even that softness felt different now. Like he wasn't soothing her because he saw her, but because he needed her calm. One night, after Emily returned from a challenging shift, she found Cole and his mother talking in the kitchen. Their conversation stopped the moment Emily entered, but their posture didn't relax the way people's bodies usually do after being interrupted. Cole smiled, stepped toward her, and kissed her cheek. He asked how her shift went. He told her dinner was already taken care of. He played the perfect partner. But his mother's eyes lingered on Emily's bag, on the paperwork sticking out from it, just a moment too long. Something unspoken cracked inside Emily, but she didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was something gentler, but unsettling, like the feeling of a storm gathering behind a mountain, far enough to ignore, but close enough to sense. Over the next weeks, Cole began showing flashes of another version of himself. Small things. A sharper tone when she misplaced a receipt. A sigh when she asked about a bill. A hint of irritation when she mentioned taking extra shifts. An offhand comment about how much responsibility he had on his shoulders. He always apologized afterward, always pulled her close, always made her feel like she was overreacting. And for a while, Emily believed him. But the mind is a strange thing, it notices patterns long before the heart is willing to acknowledge them. One evening, during dinner, Cole asked her a question that clung to her long after he fell asleep. He asked if she ever thought about selling her father's land one day. Just casually. Just conversation. Emily replied the way she always had, that the land had little monetary value, but sentimental weight. It was the only thing her father had left her. She planned to keep it forever. Cole nodded, kissed the top of her hand, and went quiet. Not disappointed. Not angry. Just quiet. It was the sort of silence that feels like someone stepping backward to recalibrate. Emily didn't know it yet, but that silence meant something. A turn had begun. A new chapter in their marriage was approaching slowly, silently, the way a tide creeps in without making a sound. Emily was still in love. Still hopeful. Still blind to the shape of what was coming. But soon, the first unmistakable clue would appear. And once she saw it, she would never unsee it again. The moment everything quietly shifted began on a Wednesday evening, one of those days Emily returned home exhausted, carrying the emotional weight of patients who clung to her for comfort and families who counted on her strength. Nursing had always been her calling, but some shifts left marks deep enough that only time could fade them. She opened the apartment door expecting the familiar silence, perhaps the faint glow of the kitchen light the way Cole used to leave it on for her. Instead, she heard muffled voices. Not arguments. Not laughter. Something in between. She placed her bag down quietly, not trying to eavesdrop, but not exactly announcing herself either. The voices were coming from Cole's office, a room that had slowly evolved from a shared space into something exclusively his. She approached with light steps, more instinct than intention. Through the cracked door, she saw Cole sitting at his desk, leaning forward with his hand pressed against his forehead. His mother sat across from him, her expression stern yet oddly triumphant, as though she had been waiting for him to admit something. Emily didn't catch the full context, just fragments of whispered words slipping through the narrow gap. Words like risk. Words like timing. Words like patience. And then the phrase that made Emily stop breathing for a moment. She trusts you completely. That's the advantage. Cole didn't respond immediately. He simply exhaled, a long, heavy breath that seemed to drag the room down with it. Emily stepped back before they could notice her. She told herself she misunderstood. Misheard. Misinterpreted. People talked about trust all the time, especially families. She had no reason, none at all, to doubt Cole or his intentions. Still, the unease that had been simmering beneath the surface flared just a little hotter. Later, when Cole emerged from his office smiling as though nothing unusual had transpired, Emily forced herself to match his energy. He wrapped an arm loosely around her waist, kissed the top of her head, and asked about her day in a tone that sounded perfectly ordinary. But that moment, those words, echoed behind every gesture he made. It became harder to ignore the patterns forming around her. Cole had begun suggesting decisions before she even voiced her opinions. He handled all the paperwork that came into the apartment. He organized their files, took control of their accounts, arranged meetings she didn't attend. Everything that was once shared had become streamlined through him. He framed it as convenience, as shielding her from stress, as taking care of her so she could focus on her demanding job. Emily appreciated the help, she truly did, but appreciation didn't extinguish the lingering question. When had she stopped seeing the details of her own life? The next week, without warning, an unfamiliar envelope arrived, thick, official, and addressed to her maiden name. She held it with curiosity, tracing the embossed seal on the front, wondering if it was hospital-related or maybe something from her father's old records. Before she could open it, Cole walked by. He didn't snatch the envelope, not physically. But his posture shifted, his attention sharpened. A split-second flash crossed his eyes, too quick for anyone untrained to notice. Emily felt the shift, even if she didn't understand it. She tucked the envelope into her bag with a casual motion, telling herself she'd read it later. Cole didn't press her. He simply kissed her cheek, smiled, and left the room. But the moment felt off. He noticed something. And whatever he noticed, he didn't like. Emily left for work early the next morning, planning to open the envelope during a break. But it disappeared before she could. Her bag had been moved during the night, not dramatically, not carelessly. Just enough that she knew someone had touched it. The envelope was gone. The first time it happened, she brushed it off. Maybe she misplaced it. Maybe she left it at work. Maybe it wasn't important. But she knew deep down that she never misplaced important documents. 2 days later, a second envelope arrived, this time addressed to her correctly. Again, official. Again, thick. Again, something she couldn't identify immediately. And again, it vanished. Emily started to question herself in ways she never had. Had she really seen the envelope? Had she opened it? Had she imagined it because she was overtired? Doubt became a steady whisper in the back of her mind. But beneath the doubt, something much stronger was forming. Suspicion. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to think that Cole, the man she loved, the man she committed her life to, could ever hide anything so openly and so confidently. Yet patterns don't lie, even when people do. Then came the night when everything crystallized, still quietly, still subtly, but unmistakably. Emily found Cole in the living room after midnight. He wasn't watching TV. He wasn't reading. He wasn't doing anything a person normally does at that hour. He was staring at a stack of papers, papers she recognized. Her papers. Medical records. Tax documents. A copy of her father's property deed. Emily stood frozen in the hallway, watching him sort through them with careful, deliberate precision. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't an accident. It was intent. And for the first time since marrying him, Emily felt something shift inside her, not panic, not fear, but awareness. Deep, sharp, undeniable awareness. Cole wasn't just the charming man she fell in love with. He wasn't just a partner under stress. He wasn't just a husband who wanted more control. There was something else beneath the surface. Something she didn't understand yet. Something she was finally ready to start seeing. This was the moment the story's tone changed. Quietly, subtly, but permanently. Because soon, Emily would make a discovery that turned suspicion into certainty. And once certainty arrived, there would be no going back. Emily woke up the next morning with the unsettling feeling still wrapped around her, clinging to the edges of her awareness like a shadow that refused to lift. Cole was already dressed for the gym, tying the laces of his sneakers in the kitchen as if the night before had never happened. He greeted her with the same easy smile, the same confident warmth, the same affectionate tone he used when things between them were uncomplicated and bright. He looked relaxed, unconcerned, and entirely unaware of how deeply Emily had watched him the night before. She didn't mention the papers. He didn't mention being awake at midnight. They both played along. But the silence between them felt heavier than conversation. While Cole was gone, Emily walked into the living room and stood in the exact spot he had been sitting. The table was empty now. Not even the smallest hint of her documents remained. The surface was spotless, organized, like a crime scene expertly cleaned. She pressed her fingers against the wood, as if she could feel the echo of whatever Cole had been doing. She couldn't. And that scared her more than anything else. At work, she tried brushing it all aside, focusing on patients, on rounds, on tasks that required steady hands and a compassionate heart. It worked for a few hours. Nursing always grounded her, always reminded her who she really was. But even in the middle of caring for others, she kept replaying that moment. Cole sorting through things he never should have touched. Documents that should have been locked away. Expressions he shouldn't have had. Every detail repeated like a looping scene in the back of her mind. She wasn't the type to snoop. She wasn't the type to investigate. She wasn't the type to assume the worst of the man she loved. But love doesn't erase instinct, especially when instinct whispers louder each day. Late that evening, Emily returned home and found Cole and his mother in the kitchen again. It wasn't the conversation itself that alarmed her. She couldn't make out most of it, but rather how abruptly they stopped talking when she walked in. The silence fell too fast, too rehearsed, too practiced. Cole's mother offered a tight smile, the kind polite people use when they don't want you to know you interrupted something important. Emily poured herself a glass of water, pretending not to notice the tension. She made small talk, asked about dinner, asked about their plans for the weekend. Everything normal. Everything casual. But while she spoke, she felt Cole's mother watching her not with hostility, but with calculation. As though Emily herself had become part of some strategy, some plan, some puzzle in motion. For the first time since meeting her, Emily wondered what exactly Cole had shared with his mother about their finances, their future, their marriage. She had always assumed it was harmless, parents and children talked. It wasn't unusual. But the way his mother looked at her now, there was expectation in it. And urgency. And something else Emily couldn't yet define. Later that night, when Cole finally sat beside her on the couch, he was affectionate in all the familiar ways, arm draped around her shoulders, soft touch tracing patterns along her arm. It should have soothed her. It usually did. But tonight, it felt like reassurance from someone who needed her calm, not her closeness. He asked about her day. He complimented her smile. He mentioned planning something for their future, something vague, something he said he'd handle when the time came. She wanted to ask what he meant, what exactly he was planning, but she held her tongue. Part of her feared the answer. Part of her feared he would lie. And the worst part was the growing suspicion that she would know the difference. The next week brought another envelope. This one was addressed correctly, delivered right to her hand by the mail carrier. She thanked him, closed the door, and held the envelope with trembling fingers. She didn't plan to open it immediately. She simply wanted to put it somewhere safe. Somewhere Cole wouldn't touch. She chose a place he never checked, inside the pocket of one of her old winter coats. It was folded, zipped, and hung in the back of their closet beneath a stack of blankets. A hiding place she never used. A hiding place he wouldn't think to search. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small surge of control. The next morning, she checked the coat. The envelope was gone. Emily's knees weakened. Her mouth went dry. Her heart pounded in a way she had never felt before, not from fear but from confirmation. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't stress. This wasn't anxiety twisting reality. Someone was removing the envelopes. Someone was tracking them. Someone knew exactly when they arrived. And there was only one person with the access and the motive to do it. When Cole came home that evening, he greeted her with a kiss, his tone light, cheerful, even flirtatious. Nothing about him hinted at guilt. Nothing about him suggested he spent the day hiding evidence of something important. Nothing about his behavior faltered, not a single detail. And that's what terrified her the most. He was calm, controlled, confident. As if he knew she wouldn't confront him. As if he was sure she wouldn't question him. As if everything was perfectly under his management. Emily began noticing things she would have ignored before. Every time she asked about finances, Cole redirected the conversation. Every time she tried discussing their future in specifics, he grew vague. Every time she needed access to documents, he insisted he'd already taken care of it. He was always one step ahead, too far ahead. And yet, nothing concrete had happened. Nothing she could point to. Nothing she could accuse him of. Nothing that proved he was doing anything wrong other than giving her a deeply troubling sense she was being guided. Not supported. Not protected. Guided. Toward what, she didn't yet understand. But the turning point came on a quiet Sunday morning when Emily left early to run errands and unexpectedly returned after forgetting her wallet. Cole didn't hear her come in. He was in the living room again, leaning over the table with his phone on speaker, flipping through the same stack of documents she thought she had never seen before. Emily froze behind the wall, listening to just enough, not everything, not the whole truth, but enough to confirm something she already sensed. Cole wasn't cleaning. He wasn't organizing. He wasn't doing anything that a loving husband should do without his wife present. He was preparing. For what? Emily still didn't know. But for the first time since this started, she was ready to find out. Emily didn't move from her spot in the hallway. She stayed completely still, one hand pressed to the edge of the wall, listening to the quiet murmur of Cole's voice drifting from the living room. She couldn't hear words clearly. Only tone. Only rhythm. Only enough to know one thing. He wasn't talking to a colleague. He wasn't talking to a friend. And he definitely wasn't talking about something harmless. It was the way his voice sank lower, the way it sharpened in certain places, the way it carried a confidence that didn't belong to someone discussing finances or errands or anything she should be comfortable hearing. When he stopped talking, she moved silently back toward the front door, slipped outside, and closed it as softly as she could. She didn't want him to know she had returned. Not yet. Not until she understood what she was dealing with. She sat in her car for nearly 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, inhaling shaky breaths she couldn't steady. She kept asking herself if she was imagining things, if stress was twisting normal situations into something darker. But then the image hit her again. The envelope's missing. The coat pocket empty. His mother stopping conversations when Emily walked into the room. The way both of them glanced at her papers as if they had memorized every detail. There was a pattern now, subtle, careful, intentional. On Monday morning, she checked the mailbox before leaving for the hospital. Inside was another letter addressed to her late father. This time she didn't even take it inside. She walked straight to her car, locked the doors, and opened it right there. She expected legal jargon or banking notices. What she found instead made her blood run cold. It wasn't a statement. Wasn't a bill. Wasn't anything official at all. Just a slip of paper. One line. Typed. Your inheritance remains unclaimed. Emily stared at the sentence, her pulse pounding in her ears. Inheritance. She had never once heard her father mention anything like that. He'd lived modestly his entire life, careful with money, but never wealthy. He didn't own a business. He didn't have investments, at least none she knew of. The land he left behind was small, rural, barely more than a field with an old fence. Her father was the kind of man who saved grocery receipts, not someone who built an inheritance. And yet, there it was. Typed. Formal. Addressed to her father's beneficiary. Her. Emily folded the note carefully, as if the paper might crumble if she handled it too harshly. She drove to work in silence, clutching the slip as though it might offer answers if she held it tightly enough. All day long she kept thinking about Cole and his mother. About the conversations she wasn't supposed to hear. About the documents disappearing from places he shouldn't even know about. When she finally got home that evening, Cole was cheerful, almost too cheerful. He hugged her tightly, cooked dinner, asked about her day, made jokes, kissed her forehead, acted like a man deeply in love. He was perfect. Too perfect. So perfect it felt like a script he'd memorized. Emily sat across from him at the table, nodding, answering, pretending everything was normal while a silent question grew stronger with every second. Why did Cole care so much about mail addressed to a dead man? That night, when he fell asleep beside her, Emily lay awake staring at the ceiling. She kept replaying everything in her head, looking for logic, for reason. Every possibility terrified her. Maybe he wasn't faithful. Maybe he was hiding something personal. Maybe he was trying to control their finances. Maybe he was planning something with his mother. Maybe this had nothing to do with love at all. Or maybe, just maybe, the truth was far more calculated than any of those things. 3 days later, the thread finally loosened. Emily was leaving her shift early, exhausted, ready to collapse in bed. She parked in front of the house, gathered her things, and headed up the walkway, only to see Cole's mother slipping out the front door. Not visiting. Not dropping something off. Leaving. Without knocking. Without ringing. With a key. Emily froze midway up the steps. Cole's mother saw her, startled for only a second before composing herself with a smile. She tried to act casual, saying she had been cleaning up a bit since she was in the area. She brushed off the key as something Cole must have given her ages ago. She avoided eye contact when Emily asked how long she had been there. When she walked away, Emily stood alone in the doorway, staring at the house. Something was different. Something in the air. Something in the way items in the living room didn't seem to be where she left them. Emily rushed to the bedroom, opened the closet, dug into the blankets, into the pockets, into every hiding place she thought she could trust. Everything was gone. Every envelope. Every scrap of mail addressed to her father. And the newest letter too, the one she had hidden at work, tucked beneath a stack of patient files. Gone. Taken. Handled by someone who had no right to touch any of it. Emily sat on the edge of the mattress, staring blankly at the floor as realization finally took hold, not fully, not all the details, not the entire picture, but enough for one truth to crystallize. Whatever Cole and his mother were doing, whatever they had been hiding, whatever they were building behind her back, she was at the center of it. Not as a partner, not as a wife, as a target. She curled her fingers into the fabric of the bedspread, breathing slowly, forcing her heartbeat to steady. She wasn't ready to confront Cole, not yet. She needed proof. She needed clarity. She needed to understand the full extent of whatever plan she had unknowingly stepped into. But one thing had changed completely. Up until now, she had been hoping she was wrong. Now, she hoped she was ready. Because the truth, whatever it was coming straight for her. Emily woke up the next morning with a knot in her stomach. One of those knots the body forms when the mind already knows something it refuses to accept. Cole was already gone. His side of the bed was cold, the house silent, the coffee pot empty. No note. No message. Not even a text explaining where he had gone or why he had left before sunrise. The silence felt intentional. She showered quickly, slipped into her scrubs, tied her hair back, and drove to the hospital. But her mind didn't stay at work. It replayed the missing letters, the mother with a key, the call in the hallway, the shifting tone in Cole's voice. By the time she clocked out that afternoon, the knot had tightened. She got into her car, exhaled slowly, and turned the key. She didn't drive home. Instead, Emily drove to the nursing home where her father had lived during the last month of his illness. She hadn't returned since the funeral, not because she avoided grief, but because coming back felt like uprooting a wound that had barely scarred. When she walked inside, the receptionist recognized her immediately. The woman's expression softened, like she remembered Emily sitting beside her father every night, reading to him, bringing him music and soups he never finished. Emily explained she needed information about old mail, anything that might still be connected to her father's records. At first, the receptionist hesitated. Then she said she'd get the file. What she brought back wasn't a file. It was a shoebox. A plain cardboard shoebox sealed with 2 strips of old tape. The receptionist smiled gently and told her it had been left for Emily months ago, but no address had been listed, and they hadn't known where to forward it. Her father had left it with the staff shortly before he passed. Inside the car, Emily sat with the shoebox on her lap. Her hands shook as she pulled off the tape. Inside were only 2 things. A small metal key. And a folded note. Her father's handwriting. Her breath caught in her throat. She unfolded the paper slowly, bracing herself. The note was short. As if he knew he wouldn't have time to explain everything. If you're reading this, you've reached the part of life I worried about most. The part where I'm not there to look out for you. You'll find out things I never wanted you to face alone. But you are more capable than you realize. Go to the bank. Use the key. Ask for box 314. And whatever you do, don't let anyone else touch what's yours. Love always. Dad. Emily stared at the note until her eyes blurred with tears. Her father had known. Not about Cole specifically, she didn't believe that. But he had known something. He had suspected someone might try to take advantage of her someday. He had prepared for it. He had created a path for her to follow only when danger was close enough to see. Her father had trusted her more than she trusted herself. Emily wiped her eyes and started the engine. The bank wasn't far. But the drive felt like she was moving through water, everything slow, heavy, pulled downward by dread and anticipation. Inside, she approached a teller and showed the key. She expected paperwork, identification, verification. She didn't expect the teller's expression. A flicker of recognition. A glance toward a supervisor. A quiet exchange she wasn't meant to hear. Then the supervisor stepped forward and asked her to follow him. He led her to a private room, asked her to sit, then unlocked a metal drawer built into the wall. Box 314. When he left the room, she finally exhaled. Emily slid the metal box toward her and lifted the lid. Inside were 3 items. First, a thick envelope with her name handwritten on the front. Second, a sealed document stamped with the banking authority, not new, not recent, but official and untouched. Third, a flash drive. Emily picked up the envelope first and opened it carefully. It contained statements, financial statements, dated nearly 10 years back. But these weren't her father's bank statements. They were account records listing mineral rights, purchase offers from an energy corporation, and letters from lawyers urging her father to sell. Her breath faltered. The land wasn't worthless. It wasn't even remotely ordinary. She flipped through more pages, hands trembling. Her father had spent years declining offers. He had kept everything quiet. He hadn't sold a single acre. He had left it all untouched. For her. Emily set the papers aside and lifted the sealed document next. It was her father's will. A newer version. More recent than the one she had been given after his death. This one was signed 1 month before he passed. Stamped by the court. Legally binding. The will stated, in precise language, that all mineral rights, land ownership, and remaining investments were to go directly to his daughter. And remain separate from marital property under all circumstances. Even in the event of marriage. Even in the event of divorce. Even in the event someone tried to claim rights through shared mortgage, collateral, or co-ownership. Emily's heart pounded. Her father had protected her from everything she still didn't understand. But someone else understood it. Someone who wanted it badly enough to tear through envelopes, search drawers, break trust, manipulate her, and use the law against her. Someone who now stood to lose everything. Her hands shook as she finally reached for the flash drive. She plugged it into the bank's small desk computer. Folders appeared on the screen. Her father had labeled them clearly. Proof. Contracts to decline. Lawyer warnings. Recordings. Notes for Emily. She clicked the last folder first. Inside were scanned letters her father had written but never delivered. Some typed. Some handwritten. All addressed to her. He told her the land was valuable. He told her the offers were increasing. He told her someone had been calling repeatedly asking about mineral rights, someone who refused to give a name. He told her he worried she might someday be pressured into signing something she didn't understand. He told her not to trust anyone with paperwork unless she had legal counsel. Then, near the bottom of the last page, she found the sentence that stopped her heart. If someone tries to take what's yours, it means they already know what I've protected for you. And if they already know, you must assume they'll do anything to get it. Emily closed the laptop slowly. Her hands were cold. Her chest felt tight. Her father had seen danger long before she did. He had left her every tool to protect herself. But now she understood the truth of what she was facing. Cole didn't want a divorce because he fell out of love. He didn't want a separation because they wanted different things. He didn't want a peaceful ending. Cole didn't marry her for love. Cole married her for access. To land he knew was valuable. To rights he couldn't obtain alone. To inheritance he couldn't legally touch unless she willingly signed it away. And someone had told him everything. Someone who wasn't Emily. Someone who wasn't her father. Someone who had been in her house. Someone who had a key. Someone who stood beside him with pride. His mother. Emily left the bank with the box in her arms, the documents pressed against her chest, and the truth finally, painfully falling into place. There were still missing pieces. Still gaps she didn't fully understand. Still intentions she hadn't uncovered. But the foundation was clear. Cole hadn't married a nurse he adored. He had married a woman he believed was easy to control. And now he was about to find out that the one person he underestimated was the only person with the power to destroy everything he planned. The courtroom felt colder than it should have. Rows of polished wooden benches, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and a tension so thick it clung to everyone's skin. Emily sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes steady. She looked nothing like the woman Cole believed he had broken. She looked composed, quiet, almost distant. Across from her, Cole lounged in his chair the way a man lounges in a victory he thinks is guaranteed. His suit stretched over his muscular frame, his jaw sharp, his smirk sharper. He tapped a pen against the divorce papers he had already signed, amused, confident, certain this was the final step before he walked away with everything he'd schemed for. His mother sat behind him, perched like a queen assessing her kingdom. She adjusted her pearl necklace, whispering to him occasionally, a look of pride in her eyes, as if she believed they had outsmarted everyone in the room. She had no idea what was coming. Neither of them did. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Cole didn't bother hiding his impatience. He gave Emily a tiny shrug, as if reminding her that this was all just formality. She wasn't leaving with much, and he expected her to accept that quietly. When everyone sat, the judge cleared her throat and picked up a sealed envelope resting on the bench. The paper was aged, slightly yellow, and marked with handwriting Emily recognized instantly. Her father's. The judge explained that the letter had been delivered to the court earlier that morning, following instructions attached to Emily's inheritance file. No one, including Emily, had known such a document existed. For the first time, Cole's smirk flickered. The judge broke the seal. The sound echoed like a crack in the ceiling of the entire courtroom. She unfolded the pages slowly and read aloud. It began with a message from a father to his daughter, gentle, heartfelt, protective. Words that carried the weight of a man who had loved quietly but fiercely. He wrote about wanting her to live freely, without fear, without people taking advantage of her kindness. He wrote about saving every dollar he could, about investing carefully, about planning for a future he wasn't sure he'd ever see. Emily blinked rapidly, gripping the edge of her seat. She hadn't expected this. She'd never imagined her father had left anything beyond the small memories she held so tightly. Then the letter shifted. Her father explained that he had placed everything he owned, every investment, every asset, every acre of land into a trust designed to protect her from exactly the kind of person who might prey on her generosity. A trust only she could control. A trust that would activate the moment someone tried to take advantage of her through marriage. The courtroom murmured faintly. Emily's breath caught. Cole's fingers went still. The judge read the final portion, the part that changed everything. The land Emily inherited, a piece of dirt Cole had mocked a dozen times, had been surveyed years earlier. Under the soil ran one of the largest untouched mineral deposits in the entire region. The trust now held the updated appraisal. The number was staggering. Emily wasn't just secure. She was wealthy beyond anything Cole had ever imagined. And every penny was protected. The judge set the papers down and looked directly at Cole. Her voice was calm, but the blow was merciless. The trust was separate property. The land was separate property. Every asset connected to Emily's father was legally untouchable. Any attempt to claim it, any manipulation, any coercion, any fraudulent document, would invalidate the prenup Cole had been relying on. Everything he thought he would gain evaporated. Cole's mother stiffened behind him, a hand flying to her mouth. The color drained from her cheeks. Her perfect plan, years in the making, was collapsing right in front of her. The judge continued. Not only would Emily keep her inheritance, but she would also be awarded half of the marital assets due to Cole's misconduct. Cole jerked upright. His jaw clenched so tightly the muscle twitched. His fists curled. His confident posture withered, replaced by disbelief so raw it bordered on panic. Emily watched him, her expression unreadable. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She didn't look triumphant. She simply sat with a steadiness he didn't recognize. She'd stopped living in his shadow. When court adjourned, Cole rushed after her in the hallway, breath uneven, words tumbling out of him in a desperate mess. He said they could fix things. He said it was all a misunderstanding. He said he had loved her. He said he still did. But Emily didn't slow down. She didn't turn around. She only paused when she reached the courthouse doors and whispered, not to him, but to herself, that she finally understood the truth her father had tried to give her. Kindness is strength, but strength is also knowing when to walk away. Outside, the sun hit her face, warm and bright, like a new beginning she hadn't realized was waiting. She stepped forward without looking back. And for the first time in years, she felt free. If you enjoyed this dramatic wedding story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Here on Bridal Confessions, we reveal the secrets, shocks, and twists behind brides and their big days. Thanks for watching.